She said, "If he asks, you're helping me cook." But the way she looked at me, made it clear we were both stirring something far more dangerous than dinner. I still remember the first time she called out to me across the fence. It was one of those late afternoons when the sun turns everything gold, the kind of light that makes even ordinary moments feel like they've been waiting their whole lives to be noticed. She stood there, a grocery bag balanced on one hip, her black hair pulled loosely back, a few strands escaping to frame her face. "Could you help me with these?" she asked, her voice warm, steady, carrying just a hint of exhaustion. I was trimming the hedge, pretending to be busy, but truthfully, I'd noticed her long before she noticed me, the quiet elegance in how she moved, the way she always seemed composed yet kind. She looked around 40, maybe a little older, but with that timeless kind of beauty that doesn't fade, it just settles, gracefully, confidently, into a person's presence. I crossed the short stretch between our yards. She smiled when I reached her, a small, genuine smile that reached her eyes. Her hands brushed mine as she passed me a bag, and for the briefest second I caught the scent of rosemary and citrus, something clean, something homey. Inside her kitchen, sunlight poured through tall windows, spilling across the counters like honey. The space felt alive, half in order, half in motion. Groceries scattered, half-chopped herbs on a cutting board, a pan still drying beside the sink. "Just set them on the counter," she said, brushing her hair back again, the same strand that refused to stay in place. "You'd think after all these years I'd learned to make only one trip from the car." I smiled. "I think some things aren't meant to be learned." She laughed, a soft, genuine laugh that made the room feel even warmer. For a moment, she leaned against the counter, catching her breath. I noticed the way she exhaled, steady but deep, as if she hadn't paused all day until now. "Thank you," she said finally, looking up at me. "My husband's away for a few days. It gets quiet around here." I nodded, unsure what to say, just aware of the faint echo in her tone, not loneliness exactly, but something close to it. After we put everything away, I turned to leave, and she called out again, "You're a good neighbor, you know that?" The words shouldn't have meant much, but they stayed with me longer than they should have. Maybe it was the way she said it, not casually, but like she was saying something truer than she intended. As I stepped back into my yard, I could still hear her humming softly in the kitchen, some old tune that didn't have words. And though we hadn't said much, something unspoken lingered in the air, a quiet thread connecting two people who didn't yet know what to call what had just begun. It was a Thursday evening when she called again. The sun had already started to fade, leaving the neighborhood wrapped in that quiet, in-between hour, not quite day, not yet night. I was halfway through fixing my bike when her voice came over the fence. "Hey," she said, smiling. "Could you give me a hand again? I'm trying something new for dinner, and I'm running out of hands." I don't know why I hesitated. Maybe because I'd been replaying our last meeting more often than I cared to admit. But I set the wrench down and followed her inside anyway. The kitchen smelled of butter and herbs this time, something warm, alive, comforting. A slow jazz tune hummed from a small radio on the counter, soft enough that her voice still filled the room. She was cutting vegetables, sleeves rolled to her elbows, a smudge of flour near her wrist. "If he asks," she said suddenly, a playful spark in her tone, "you're helping me cook." She didn't explain who he was, I didn't need to ask. But there was something about the way she said it that made the air between us shift. Light-hearted, yes, but also protective. A shared little secret wrapped in humor. I took the knife she handed me, careful not to meet her eyes for too long. "Then I guess I better make it look convincing," I said. She laughed quietly. "Just don't cut your fingers off trying to impress me." I tried not to smile at that, but it slipped out anyway. As we worked, the silence between us felt different, fuller somehow. She moved gracefully around the kitchen, her movements precise yet unhurried. Every now and then, our arms brushed as we reached for the same bowl or spice jar. Each accidental touch carried a flicker of warmth that lingered longer than it should have. Cooking's easier with company, she said after a while, stirring something in the pan. When you're alone, you start talking to the food just to hear a voice answer back. I glanced at her, but she kept her eyes on the pot, pretending it was just a joke. The quiet that followed wasn't awkward, it was tender, real. At one point, she leaned close to hand me a towel. Her hair brushed against my shoulder, light as air, but it sent a ripple through me that I couldn't hide. She seemed to notice, because she drew back gently, offering a small, knowing smile, the kind that both reassures and unsettles. When the food was done, we stood side by side, tasting the sauce from the same spoon, both trying not to make it feel like anything more than cooking. As I left, she walked me to the door. The last light of dusk pooled behind her, soft and golden. "You did well, chef," she said. "If he asks, you've been helping me cook all along." Her smile lingered even after I stepped outside, the scent of her kitchen still clinging to me, butter, rosemary, and something I couldn't name. Something warm. Something quietly dangerous. After that night, helping her in the kitchen became something of a quiet routine. It was never planned, never spoken of, but every few days, she'd call over the fence just as the light began to fade. Sometimes it was for company, sometimes for help opening a jar or tasting a sauce. But mostly, it was for conversation, the kind that fills the empty spaces without either person realizing how much they needed it. Her house always smelled like something new: baked bread, simmering broth, rain-soaked flowers from the garden she kept by the porch. The air felt different inside her home, slower, softer. There was an ease in how she moved now, less guarded, as if my presence had quietly become a part of her rhythm. One evening, we sat by the kitchen window, dinner plates pushed aside, the soft glow of a lamp between us. Outside, the world had gone completely still, only the faint hum of crickets and the distant sound of a dog barking somewhere down the street. She was telling me about her past, the things she used to love doing before life became a checklist. "I used to paint," she said, tracing her finger along the rim of her glass. I stopped when I realized no one ever looked at them anymore. I watched her eyes as she spoke, they caught the lamplight like amber, full of quiet ache and unspoken years. "You should start again," I said softly. "Even if no one looks. Maybe that's when it matters most." She smiled faintly, but it wasn't her usual polite smile. It was small and trembling, like she didn't quite trust it yet. "You talk like someone much older than 20-something, she said. "Maybe I just listen more than most," I replied. She looked at me for a long moment, not searching, not judging, just seeing. The kind of look that makes you forget how to breathe for a second. Then, she exhaled, the corners of her mouth softening. "You make this place feel alive again," she said finally, almost under her breath, as if she hadn't meant to let it escape. The words settled in the air between us, heavier than they should have been. I didn't answer right away, I didn't trust myself to. Instead, I just smiled, staring at the half-empty plates, trying to steady the strange mix of warmth and ache rising in my chest. Outside, the last streaks of daylight faded completely, and the kitchen slipped into that gentle half-darkness lit only by the lamp. I could see the outline of her profile against the window, calm, beautiful, and distant in a way that made me both grateful and afraid. We didn't say much after that. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, it was full, alive, like a secret we both understood but weren't ready to name. When I finally stood to leave, she thanked me, her voice barely above a whisper. But what she really meant, I think, was "don't go too far." It happened on one of those nights that feel like they're made of pauses, when time itself seems to hesitate, unsure whether to move forward or stay suspended between two breaths. I had stopped by to return a book she'd lent me, something she said had a soul worth revisiting. I meant to just drop it off, a quick hello, nothing more. But the smell of something warm and familiar pulled me inside before I could think twice. She was in the kitchen again, always the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, a faint shimmer of light on her skin from the lamp above the counter. "You're just in time," she said, smiling softly. "I made too much pasta." Help me fix my mistake. I should have said no. But the truth was, I didn't want to. We ate in quiet conversation, laughing here and there, her teasing less cautious now, my words a little bolder. Outside, rain began to fall in thin, steady lines against the windows, soft and rhythmic. The sound filled the spaces our words didn't. When dinner was done, we cleaned up side by side. She passed me the dishes, and I dried them, the rhythm of our movements settling into something instinctive, unspoken but shared. At one point, our hands brushed over the same plate. It was nothing, really, a fleeting touch. But it stopped everything. The air shifted. The rain outside seemed louder, the clock on the walls suddenly slower. Neither of us looked away, though neither dared to move closer either. Her breath caught, I could see it. And for the first time, she didn't fill the silence with a joke or a polite word. She just stood there, her fingers still lightly grazing mine, her eyes searching for something, permission, reassurance, maybe both. It's getting late, she said finally, voice low, not quite steady. The words were gentle but heavy, like she was reminding herself as much as me. Yeah, I murmured. I should probably go. But neither of us stepped back. She turned off the faucet, the sound of running water cutting off abruptly, leaving only the rain and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Her hand lingered near mine, as if caught in indecision, before she finally pulled away, wiping her palms on a towel that didn't really need it. At the door, she hesitated again, one hand resting on the frame. Thank you, she said, simple, quiet, almost fragile. For what? I asked. For being kind, she replied. Then she smiled, a small, weary curve of her lips that didn't quite reach her eyes. When I stepped outside, the rain hit my face, cold and clean. Behind me, I heard the door close softly, not a final sound, but one filled with restraint. That night, lying awake, I could still feel the ghost of her touch on my hand, light as rain, impossible to forget. After that night, something shifted, not loudly, not suddenly, but in the quiet way light fades before you realize it's gone. Days passed without her voice over the fence. The space between our houses, once filled with small exchanges and laughter, now felt like a border neither of us wanted to cross. I told myself she was busy. That maybe her husband had returned, or she was caught up in life's usual rhythms again. But deep down, I knew, she was pulling away. And the silence between us wasn't accidental. One evening, I saw her outside, trimming the rose bushes by the porch. The light was dim, the air still damp from the morning rain. She looked up when she noticed me, hesitated, then forced a smile, polite, careful, the kind meant for neighbors, not for the kind of closeness we'd begun to share. Hey, I said softly. Hey, she echoed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Her hands were trembling slightly, maybe from the chill, maybe not. I took a step closer, then stopped. Haven't seen you around. Yeah, she said quickly. Just, been busy. The pause that followed said everything her words didn't. Finally, she sighed, setting the shears down on the porch railing. Maybe we shouldn't spend so much time together. Her voice cracked on the last few words, quiet, almost apologetic. People talk. And I don't want things to get misunderstood. The air tightened around us. I wanted to tell her I didn't care what people thought. That what we had wasn't wrong, that it wasn't even defined enough to be judged. But the way she stood there, shoulders drawn, eyes somewhere between me and the ground, told me this wasn't about them. It was about her. She was fighting herself. I get it, I said finally, forcing a small nod. You don't have to explain. She looked at me then, really looked, and for a second, the guarded expression faded. Her eyes softened, and the sadness in them felt deeper than guilt. It's not that I don't like having you around, she whispered. It's just. I don't know where this is heading. I didn't either. But I knew how empty her house had felt without laughter, and how quiet my days had become without her voice. A wind passed between us, carrying the scent of wet earth and rose petals. It felt like the world itself was holding its breath. "Take care of yourself, okay?" she said, turning toward the door. "You too," I managed to reply. When she went inside, the porch light flickered once, then went out completely. That night, her window stayed dark. And for the first time since we'd met, I realized how heavy quietness can be when it used to sound like someone's laughter. A week passed before I saw her again. The days had grown longer, but they felt emptier somehow, stretched thin and colorless, like something vital had gone missing from the rhythm of things. Every evening, I'd catch myself glancing toward her house. The curtains stayed drawn, the porch light stayed off. I tried convincing myself it was better this way, that some distances are necessary. But there was a quiet ache that refused to fade, not sharp, just persistent, like an echo that keeps finding its way back. Then, one night, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, she was standing there, wrapped in a soft gray sweater, her hair slightly tousled from the wind. In her hands was a small pot. Steam rose from it, curling into the cool air between us. "I made too much soup," she said, smiling awkwardly. "It's nothing fancy, just. I thought you might like some." Her voice was gentle but unsure, the kind of voice that belongs to someone testing the water before stepping in. I moved aside to let her in. Inside, the world felt smaller, quieter, but warmer too. She set the pot down on my table and glanced around as if expecting things to be different. Maybe I had changed. Maybe we both had. I poured the soup into 2 bowls, the aroma filling the small space, garlic, thyme, and something faintly sweet. She sat across from me, fingers curling around the edge of the bowl, as though she needed something to hold on to. We ate in silence at first, both waiting for the other to speak. Finally, she looked up, her eyes softer than I remembered. "I missed our evenings," she said quietly. "The talking. The noise. The way the house didn't feel so still." Her words came out fragile, but honest, stripped of the polite distance she tried to build between us. I felt something loosen in my chest. "I missed them too," I admitted. She nodded slowly, her expression both relieved and guilty. "I shouldn't have pulled away like that," she whispered. "I thought it would make things easier. But it just made everything feel smaller." I wanted to reach across the table, to take her hand, but I didn't. Instead, I just let the quiet stretch, safe, unhurried, meaningful. The rain began again outside, a soft, rhythmic tapping against the windows, like the same night weeks ago when everything had changed. She smiled faintly at the sound. "It's funny," she said, half to herself. "Rain always makes me feel like starting over." She finally reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. The touch was light, almost nothing, but it carried everything she couldn't say aloud. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't be," I said. "You came back." She smiled again, this time fully, warmth returning to her eyes. For the first time in weeks, the silence between us didn't feel empty. It felt like home. Weeks passed, and life found its way back to rhythm, not the same rhythm as before, but something gentler, slower, touched by everything that had happened between us. Her husband returned. I saw him one morning, unloading luggage from the car, his voice firm but kind as he called her name from the driveway. She came out smiling, composed, her hair tied neatly, her tone light. From my window, I watched her brush a hand across his shoulder, the gesture practiced, familiar, yet distant somehow. It shouldn't have hurt to see it. But it did, not sharply, just with that quiet ache that comes when something beautiful has reached its natural end. For a few days, I stayed away. I figured that was what she wanted, what we both needed. The unspoken closeness between us deserved to end softly, not with a door slammed shut. But one evening, just as the sun began to sink into a pool of orange and rose behind the rooftops, I heard her voice again. "Hey," she called, from across the fence. When I looked up, she was there, holding 2 mugs of tea, steam rising into the cool dusk. "Truce," she said with a small, tentative smile. I walked over. She handed me a mug, and for a moment, our fingers brushed, that same warmth, still there, still steady. We stood by the fence, sipping in silence as the neighborhood settled into night. Crickets had started their song, and somewhere far off, someone's wind chime rang softly in the breeze. "How's everything?" I asked finally. "Normal," she said, after a pause. Then, with a faint laugh, or at least pretending to be, she turned toward me, her eyes calm now, not distant, but at peace. "You know," she said, "it's strange. I thought I'd feel guilty for missing our talks. But I don't. I'm just grateful." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "There's a kind of stillness after a storm," she continued softly. "It doesn't mean nothing happened. It just means it mattered enough to leave something behind." The words hung between us, gentle, final, and true. She set her empty mug down on the fence and smiled, that same quiet, graceful smile I'd first seen months ago. "You'll always have a place here," she said. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't an invitation. It was something purer, an acknowledgement of what we'd shared and what would always remain, even unspoken. I looked at her, at the way the fading light touched her hair, at the peace in her expression. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to hold on or to question. "I know," I said. When I walked back to my side, the evening air felt softer. The space between our homes no longer felt empty, it felt alive, filled with everything we'd said, and everything we never needed to. Some stories don't end with declarations. They end quietly, with gratitude, and with the knowledge that even fleeting connections can leave something permanent behind.